Welcome to the Cannabis Investor Series, as we present a first-hand look into the rapidly evolving cannabis industry and the opportunities that lie ahead.
Hi, my name's Anna Sarah, and I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange, and you are joining us as part of the Cannabis Investor Series with the CSE. I am joined today by Elias Theodorou. Thank you so much for joining me, Elias.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Elias, you have quite the background, and a big part of that background as a professional athlete, as well as merging into the cannabis space. So there's lots for us to digest today, and I want to get into all of it. I think we're even going to dive a little bit into the psychedelic space a little bit at the end. But why don't we start off? Tell me about yourself and your role as a professional athlete.
Yeah, well, again, first and foremost, thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to both tell my story and continue fighting the stigma of medical cannabis inside the cage and out. My coming to as an athlete was a little bit different than most. Funny story, I ended up getting into a fight that I didn't want to get into. It was like high school. I tried to walk away, and essentially someone pulled me into it and hit me, and a kind of light went off, and I, being Canadian, kind of give him a jersey or two and hit him a couple times. And that was actually captured on a razor. So that kind of dates the time that it was. And I got a little bit of hype behind it. I guess I was a legend of my own mind. Fast track a couple of fights there afterwards. I was a little bit of I was undefeated in my area, if you will. And then after my first year at university, I, was enlightening in the mind, and, soon I realized that the body was, intertwined with that when I actually had my first loss, which was filmed once again. This time it went viral, essentially something similar to like World Star, and I lost. So this time, that great high obviously fell, and my first loss was in front of, a viral video that was in front of like a couple million people, give or take. And it was actually the same time that YouTube was coming out. So I was kind of like reenacting the story, and a friend of mine that I worked with came in and asked me if I was all right. And I asked him, how come you knew that? How come he asked? And he said, well, it's on YouTube. And I said, what's YouTube? So mortified, and again, a little bit of my identity was kind of shattered, and I confided in my father. And at that point, he said, you love that mixed martial arts, that UFC stuff so much. Why don't you go to the gym and make sure this never happens again? And I did. Again, my motives may have been, to get back at this guy at the beginning, but eventually I centered myself, and I kind of very much found some form of better enlightenment. Like I said, I was going through university, and I, found both body and mind through, physical and mental expansion. Fast track to after my first year at university.
What were you taking, by the way, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I was getting a degree in creative advertising for Guelph Humber, basically Humber out in Lakeshore. It's a pretty well-renowned degree program, and really proud to be a Humber alumni.
I bet that that type of education would help you in what you're doing today, huh?
100%. I'm essentially a boutique advertising agency where the brand is myself, and obviously I can be more authentic and true to myself. I'm both the creative team and the copywriter, but obviously I've now hired some help to expand on that. It's not only about me doing me, it takes a team, both in the cage and out. So right after I finished my university and I got a degree, my parents, were at graduation and asked me what I'm going to do. I had the program's really great because the fact it actually has a paid co-op through it. And I actually had some offers for some ad agencies right out of university. But instead of taking that, I basically told my parents that I was actually going to jump on a plane the very next day and go to Thailand and have a couple fights. And that's what I did. I trained for about 3 months, had a couple fights. I ended up knocking out 2 guys in one evening. And it was right then and there that I realized that this was the job for me. So I doubled down in mixed martial arts, and my path is a fighter. And I kind of gave myself a goal to get into the UFC before my 25th birthday. And I was able to, by hard work and by luck, and also by a great team around me inside the cage and out, I was able to become the first Canadian to win the famed reality show, The Ultimate Fighter. And I basically won a contract on the reality show, and did it kind of with a stamp on it, if you will, because I was actually the first UFC fighter to break the fourth wall. It was really close to Mother's Day. So I actually knocked out my opponent, but right before I said, "Hi, Mom."
Wow. You know what? As a parent, I would be terrified if my son said to me, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to Thailand to fight for a while." So clearly your parents are very supportive and play a
Yes,
big role in your
but
success.
yeah, no, 100%, 110%. Both my parents and, in many ways, my coaches, my training partners, even though mixed martial arts is very much a individual sport, it very much takes an army.
You're kind of in these when you're doing this kind of as part of your career path, or you're in Thailand doing it. Do you fight every day? Do you fight weekly? What does that look like? I mean, I'm assuming you train every day, but what
Oh
does
yeah.
the life of an MMA fighter look like?
Yeah, again, there's a whole process, right? So I do train every day, twice a day, essentially. And sometimes I do shotgun half marathons just because. I'm big into cardio. I'm big into kind of my style is, as in many professions, there's both generalists and specialists, and I'm very much a generalist. So I look at my opponent with my coaches, and we kind of set up a game plan to match my strengths against their weaknesses, and kind of build up my weaknesses to make sure that I can have a winning game plan on fight night. And at this point, I think I have 20 wins and 3 losses. So what's called doing pretty good so far. Um, and in that process, I'm basically training anywhere between 1.5 to 3 hours every single session, and then I kind of like a rest in between. And again, I'm focusing on my diet, and that's where actually me as a both athlete and patient intertwine more in today. My actual beginning in like journey with cannabis and plant-based medicine very much started as a athlete viewing a coach, a friend, a mentor, and a training partner using cannabis in their own right, being patients for themselves. And then as my conditions as a patient started to flare and become more of an issue, I tended to look to cannabis as an alternative to the first line medicines like opioids, painkillers, SSRIs. It's what worked best for me. And it was actually during the time of 2015 when the UFC partnered with the United States Anti-Doping Agency, which is part of the World Anti-Doping Agency, and then more broadly the Olympics. The UFC hired them on at that point, and that's when I found myself at a crossroads, because cannabis is actually considered a banned substance in competition. So it was then I started to do my due diligence and reached out to my family doctor, who again prescribed cannabis for me as both patient and athlete. And that's when I began the process of what's called a therapeutic use exemption for cannabis. Cannabis, as I mentioned, is a prohibited substance, but you can apply for a therapeutic use of an exemption for specific medicines, and cannabinoids are one of those. So my condition, more broadly speaking, is called bilateral neuropathy. It's essentially nerve damage of my upper extremities. And the way to explain it is, there's nerve endings that are kind of a little bit both shot, a little bit miswired. Again, that doesn't actually, it doesn't actually hinder my ability to compete, but it hinders my ability to compete at a competitive or a equal playing field, because other athletes can use their medicine without any issue. Like for instance, there's no issue of you crushing a handful of Percocets, but if I had cannabis in my system 2 weeks earlier, 3 weeks earlier, depending on your size, you can get suspended, your fight overturned, half your purse taken away, and the stigma of being a cheater. I'm a huge believer in clean sport. One of the proudest moments I had as a UFC fighter was when the UFC partnered with USADA, because I do believe in clean sport. The only issue was, again, because USADA gets paid by the United States government, and the current stance of cannabis as a Schedule I drug, they don't look at it with any medical property. So me applying for my therapeutic use exemption was kind of an uphill battle.
So Elias, tell me what the process was for you to be able to use cannabis as part of your practice in sport.
Yes, like I mentioned, it was a bit of an uphill battle. I had to basically exhaust all other options. So from painkillers to SSRIs, to many different types of, anti-inflammatories that, again, didn't work with me, stomach-wise, bloating-wise. There are many different aspects as me as an athlete that has to compete at a high level. but again, that are detrimental to me. So for instance, Percocets, they really, clouded my mind. Different types of opioids really clouded my mind. And obviously the issue of addiction was always kind of in the back of my mind also as well of that. Also to the fact of I was kind of told to take SSRIs that essentially just numbed me, more broadly speaking, didn't actually fix the actual inflammation or any of the flaring or pain episodes that I have as an athlete and a patient. So even to the point where the SSRIs, some of them that they were telling me to take, my family doctor who helped me throughout this process essentially was scratching his head because he said, a lot of these medicines we have stopped suggesting for people to take for pain since the 90s. Again, it was just an outdated mindset, an outdated process that I was willing to put some skin in the game and willing to fight the good fight, because more broadly speaking, I knew the end goal would allow my medicine to be recognized, but also to create precedent not only for myself but all other athletes, because that's what this kind of ruling would do. I've kind of fast tracked into the process that after I left the UFC, I became a free agent, but I was able to be an agent of change for plant-based medicine, where I applied for a therapeutic use exemption in British Columbia via the commission, which is actually partnered and overseen by the British Columbia government, and they recognized both me more broadly speaking in regards to BC constitutional health and fundamental rights, but also the Charter of Rights and Freedom in Canada more broadly, to Medicaid is prescribed by my doctor and afforded to me as my Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So I was able to set precedent not only for myself, but all other athletes in British Columbia, and effectively many places in Canada where this can actually be looked at more broadly speaking, because commissions actually work in congruency with each other. And in many ways, they validate different rulings in different jurisdictions. So, earlier in 2020, I was able to get a therapeutic use exemption. And then I was also able to be both fighter and promoter, bringing back combat sports in all of Canada after COVID with my own event, which was completely funded and partnered with cannabis companies as a 19 plus and 21 plus age gated event that educated and advertised cannabis in a positive light, fighting the stigma not only for myself but other athletes.
Just out of curiosity, Elias, just to go back for a second, the condition that they started prescribing medicine for, was that a condition that was born from the physical stress that you've put on your body becoming an athlete, or was that
Both?
Okay.
Both. In a previous life, I was a semi-pro skateboarder. I used to jump off of really tall buildings before I realized I was terrified of heights, so that wasn't a good idea. And I actually, doing a magazine, I nicked the top of a handrail and fell all the way down and broke my hand, 2 breaks, 4 fractures, but didn't want to look like a chicken. So I ended up doing the trick anyways, and didn't go to the doctor for roughly 6 months. I was dumb and young and thought I was invincible. And my body actually healed. My body healed broken. And blood flow is very important in your bones, because if there's any loss of blood flow, then degeneration happens. So the scaphoid is actually the one bone in the body that only has one direction of blood flow. So they had to re-break my bone, did a bone graft where they take bone out of my hip, they scrape off some of the cartilage there, and they do a bone graft and reattach my wrist. The mobility is an issue, and there are some flare-ups. That's where the basis of my medical component of my case comes from. But so for the last fight, I was able to again validate my therapeutic use exemption, create precedent not only for myself but all other athletes in MMA and boxing, both professional and amateur. And I'm really happy to say that professional sports and amateur sports now, I think, are starting next month in BC, and all like many other fighters that I know are now competing in BC, because it's one of the only provinces that actually are able to get back to competition, safely, and also with the help of, my team and I's protocols to aid back to work and back to competition process.
Well, as someone who lives in BC, I'm very happy to hear that we're progressive that way. I know BC always has been when it comes to that, but
Mhm.
but that's really exciting to hear. I have a bit of a ignorant question or a green question, to ask you. Um,
Funny.
when you use cannabis as part of your medicinal use,
Mhm.
whether it be for aches, pains, it could even be anxiety from perhaps you've had a big fight and coming down anxiety from that. How do you decide? Do you and your doctors, is it like medicine where you take a pill or you rub on ointment, or is it a little bit more informal than that?
It's all of the above, really. My day kind of is all encompassing in the many different ways to actually medicate and consume the plant. I start in the morning and very much, we'll start with a one-to-one tincture. Then I'll actually, because the really interesting thing to kind of more broadly speak about is the fact that my therapeutic use exemption isn't just for marijuana. It's actually for different cannabinoids, because I felt it prudent to get different cannabinoids recognized as medicine, because the fact that the BC government actually runs the commission, this is actually another additional medical cannabis rights in Canada, because it's actually the government that is recognizing cannabis in sport. So I'm happy to and honored to do my part in getting cannabis cannabis getting recognized more broadly as a plant-based medicine. So I use it for my bilateral neuropathy, my nerve damage, but I use it actually more broadly speaking for pain management. And obviously there's different more medicinal. Obviously cannabis in many ways is both medical and medicinal, because at the end of the day, we're all bags of chemicals, and we've got to figure out, in my view, with consultation, whether it's a counsel, whether it's, a doctor, or anything in between, figuring out what works best for you. Going from the tincture, the one-to-one tincture that I start with, I actually will put raw cannabis in my smoothie for THCA. I make smoothies with my kale and just chock it full of vitamins and different forms of healthy fats, and that's how I kind of get more cannabis and more anti-inflammatory properties, because cannabis, just like other vegetables, you lose some of the minerals when you heat it up. Same thing with cannabis. So I get my day filled with chock full of vitamins and cannabinoids right off the day. I'll go train typically 10, 11 o'clock. And then from there, afterwards, I kind of do assessment to see where I'm at, and I'll vaporize. The vaporizer I use of choice is the Mighty from Stores and Bickle, or the Volcano from Stores and Bickle. And then, then I'll recover. I'll usually do some stretching. I'll take a nap, because naps save lives. Then I'll go to my next training session, and kind of from there, I switch, to higher, because I very much use CBD and more upbeat cannabinoids in the beginning of the day, and then I start switching to one-to-ones, and then hybrids, and then eventually full-blown indica or indica style hybrids that very much help you go to sleep. And then at the end of the day, I actually high dose CBD, because that CBD actually counters the THC. For those that don't know, THC actually, you don't not dream, you actually just don't remember your dreams as much. So I'm a very vivid dreamer. I love to dream. So I just chock full of CBDs at the end of the night, whether it's flower, whether it's drops, and I kind of counterbalance that, and I get to dream wide awake and get ready for my day to do the same.
Wow, so it's very much a part of your full day routine. That's really interesting. I thought kale, I was doing quite well with kale, but apparently I need to rethink things. That's quite interesting. And I mean, obviously, I think the one thing that you did say that is really important, I think, as we've gone through this whole series, is that everyone has a very different relationship with the plant. And that's one thing that every advocate I've spoken to has says, find out what your relationship is, right? And everyone is very different. You're using yours for a very specific purpose, and obviously have experimented with how it works best with your body, even down to how you dream at night, which is super interesting. I know that you're a bit of a thought leader on social media. You have quite a following. When you started going through this process, and I don't so much mean the professional athlete side, but when cannabis became a part of it, how did that change reception from other athletes or just people in general wanting to kind of be able to follow your career path? Was it a good thing? Was it a difficult thing? I mean, I know what you went through with the commissions and that type of thing, but when it came to your followers, how did they react to this?
I'm very lucky, I think, because I put very much a positive, expression of myself, both as a fighter and obviously as an advocate. I think I get a lot of those positive vibes right back, positive, reception right back. And in many ways, I owe the success that I have today by the giants of the shoulders of the giants before me.
You didn't feel nervous coming out? I mean, I watch you on social media. You didn't feel nervous coming out and going, I'm owning this? You didn't have any backlash on it?
I did in some capacity, but again, I think many ways I was just, being a very, I was, ironically speaking, be a very unapologetic Canadian when it comes to fighting for plant medicine. And, I think, we have the luxury and also the moment of Canada recognizing cannabis as a medicine for many, many years now. And also now, more broadly speaking, no longer putting people in jail for a plant. So I very much want to, do my part to, respect the plants and respect what it's done for me and what I think it can do for other people when they have more access to it. Again, I'm not telling everyone they need cannabis. I just think that everyone that needs it should have the opportunity to use it, whether prescribed by their doctor or afforded to them by the Charter of Rights of Freedom.
That is very well put, Elias. Thank you for that. Okay, let's talk about what you're doing today. I know that you have you're a very busy man. I'm not sure how you quite fit it all in. I guess apparently you have good sleeps at night, but tell us some of the stuff you're working on today.
Yeah, obviously I had my last fight where I was both fighter and promoter. I was able to bring cannabis and also combat sports back to the nation. And I'm very proud of the ability to see other athletes now compete regularly as competition is continuing to go full steam ahead. The game plan is actually to now continue that fight. And I'm already in the process of applying for therapeutic use exemptions with different jurisdictions in the US and potentially Europe as well. So I'm very much looking to fight in different jurisdictions that respect my right to medicate, just like they respect other medicines. And I'm looking at, have no difference, just a level playing field, being able to use my medicine. And then again, as an athlete that is looking to, fight the stigma more broadly speaking in the cage and out, I'm just kind of always in the gym, always getting ready and always looking to get my hand raised, whether it's in the cage or out. And then, moving forward, I very much plan to, much like I've done with cannabis as a plant, I actually plan to fight for plant-based medicine more broadly speaking, and I'll have more in the psychedelics space to come out and talk about and kind of put myself out there again in a way that I'll be unapologetically, but working with thought leaders and organizations and companies in the space, and some of them might be listed on your fine exchange in the near future.
Well, I hope so. Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit because I think obviously you are breaking down walls on stigma, and that's really important. We need people such as yourselves out there doing it. And there, obviously there's a lot of people that look up to professional athletes. You guys have a big role publicly out there. And so let's talk about that switch. I mean, obviously cannabis and psychedelics play a very different role medicinally. So, I mean, there's by no means are you trying to say that these two things achieve the same goal.
No.
But why don't we talk about that a little bit? What are your thoughts on psychedelics coming and playing a role within the professional athlete sport?
I think more broadly speaking, whether it's PTSD, whether it's depression, whether it's concussions, I think the more we can look to actually examine these substances as potential medicines and kind of get back the lost time that we've had with the prohibition and the stigma that have happened more broadly speaking in our society, but also in the medical and professional world. You asked what was the backlash when in reality it's just the plants, and our generation and many And now more and more generations are looking at cannabis and looking at psychedelics as an option.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to keep talking with you as you develop your further investments and your further adventures into the psychedelic space listed on the CSE. Let's talk again. Thank you so much.
This is the Cannabis Investor Series.